Hi everyone, we are going to sketch out ideas to commemorate 2020. 2020 has been a bad year for everyone, so we're going to make our design using the very popular theme of the dumpster fire. Now this design can be made fairly simply, but I also want to show some more complicated ways of using a technique to make a print with multiple colors so that we can print our letters in separate colors or numbers here and attach them, and even the fire. That way we can make a three-part print and glue it together to have a nicer looking design, and even make ourselves a truly three-dimensional version of this design where we will create a box for our dumpster shape. That way we can put a little LED lamp inside here that will light up our fire, which, if we make it thin enough, will glow from the inside. So we can make ourselves a three-part print that's going to have a nice fire effect. We are going to build a multi-part print to make a light up 2020 dumpster fire decoration. We'll see that we're going to use a handy little piece that's already in Tinkercad here. If we click on our basic shapes drop down and we go to assemblies under circuits, our first one here is the glow, which this shape, while it shows you the LED and battery that are supposed to be slotted into it, it's going to export as a print without those shapes, and you'll have just this LED battery holder. You can replace this with your own LED light. If you have something, just make sure that you measure it so we can tell that it's going to fit inside of our finished project. Alright, let's move our examples out of the way and let's get started. So making the body of our little lamp here, which is a dumpster, we're going to go over to basic shapes, drag out a box, and I'm going to click on the corner, and we will make this guy 60 by 40. And 40 tall as well. Okay, let's color code these things so I know what they are. And we're going to need some handles on the side here for our forklift to pick up our dumpster. So I'm going to scroll down the basic shapes and grab a polygon. And since this is 40 by 40, I'm going to design this first part looking down. That way it makes it easier to line up, and I can rotate everything at the end. So I'm going to click on this last button here to switch to flat view, and click on the top of the box so everything lines up perfectly on the top. So let's place this where I want it to be. And one more look from the side to make sure this is, well, we'll make it 30, and we will raise it up. Oops, make sure not to rotate. Hit undo on that, just to make sure that I didn't rotate it by accident. And we will move it up. Like that. If you want it to be precisely in the middle, you can select both of them and use the Align tool. Looks like I got it right in the middle. All right. Now let's make a hole that goes all the way through this. Scrolling up to our box and drag it into position. Let's use the focus or fit shapes to view. That way I can see this a little bit better, and we'll make this box much taller so it sticks out the top. And since we do not want this to cut out any part of our dumpster, we are going to draw a selection box that touches just the two of those. Let's see. And we'll use the Align tool once more and line them up centered. And then we will click on Group. And I'll change the color so it matches. Nice. Now let's make our other side by duplicating this one, going all the way over to Mirror on the other side, and we'll flip it in the other direction. And then I'll use the arrow keys to move it out to the other side. Let's hold down Shift to select the other one. We'll group them together. Making complicated shapes means making a lot of groups so that you can handle each of them individually. So let's go ahead and select both of our things, use the Align tool, line them up in the center. Now the handles are the same on both sides. The next thing this needs is a slant on the top. So let's look at this from the side. And let's grab a box. Oops. Now that's going to be in a weird spot, isn't it? Yep. Let's undo that. Always look down at your work plane when you drag something new in, or it could be way off in space. So we'll make this box larger in all dimensions. Oops. It's kind of a little extra large, but that's fine. And let's grab our rotate handle and turn it to the first notch there. I think 22.5 degrees. It's plenty. Let's move it. 22.5 degrees looks like it might be too much. Since I don't want to cut into my handles here, I'm just going to back up a little bit and grab this rotate handle. And when you go outside of the circle, you can move it 1 degree at a time. So I will move it until I like the angle. And there we go. Now I have the slope that's going to be the top. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off by grouping just these two together. And then I'm going to cut the grooves in the front and back. So for this, I can rotate things, or I can go ahead and use this existing roof shape. Although I still have to rotate it. Well, we'll go 90 degrees and turn it into a hole. And now, because of this shape, I have a 45-degree angle here on both sides. So we can move this down under the ground until it just cuts a small notch in the side there. Now I will drag this handle to make it bigger. And we will duplicate our hole and use the arrow keys to move it up to the other side of... There we go. Now that I have these holes, I'm going to drag a box and select them. And then I will duplicate both of these. And we'll use our mirror tool. We look at it from the side, we can see an up and down arrow. So I'll flip them upside down. Then I will have to turn off the mirror tool so that I can use my raise and lower to move this all the way up to the front. Now I can see that there's still a problem with the slope here. So the place that I have put my notches is going to go right up to the edge of that. So I think I'm going to have to make the back of my dumpster here a little bit taller. So since that was a previous group, I can change this by simply double-clicking on this group. When you double-click on a group, you're going to see this red highlight around it, showing you that you are looking at the insides of a group. When you click outside of it, it will return to being grouped. So if I double-click here, I can go ahead and select my hole, and I'll use my arrow keys to move it out so it's not going to intersect with my notches there. And then I will pick my main body here and we'll stretch it out just a bit so that it's going to cover this whole slope. A little flat spot at the top. I think that's good. All right, now we click outside and the changes are made to our group. All right. Now we just have to group our holes for the notches here. And while I'm at it, I'm going to attach. No, I'm not going to attach these yet. Let's look at this from the middle. And we'll drag a selection box through the middle and hit group. So now the body of my dumpster has got its notches, and these handles are still separate. Next, I want to add my 2020. So let's go down here and grab a text object. And we'll pick our text box up here and type in 2020. Then we're going to need to make this a separate piece, and we only want it to be in a small amount at the front. So I'm going to make this thing 3 millimeters. Then we'll raise it up. And since we know this is 40, we want to raise this up until it is at a couple of millimeters in, so 38. Just a few millimeters below the front of this. Now when we move it, it will still be sticking out of the front surface. Looks good. Now I can just change the size here so that it fits. And we'll hold down Shift to select this and use the Align tool to center it. All right, in this case, I think I'm going to nudge it so that I can center it between the two notches. Looking good. At this point, we can leave this added here instead of making it a second piece, and you can paint this at the end. However, I'm going to turn this into a hole so that I can add inlaid letters or numbers later. So I'm going to need a copy of this to print later. So I'm going to click on Duplicate, and we're going to move our duplicate over and just hit D to drop it on the floor so that I can save that for later. And then, just like in our flat design, I'm going to change this into a hole and then go down to bevel. Because the hole will be exactly the same size as this, it'll be very hard to force our numbers into these holes. But if we click on bevel here, and we'll click on the 0 and type in 0.25. All of the numbers will get 0.25, 1/4 of a millimeter thicker all the way around, which makes for a easy way to get them into their holes. All right, let's group this last hole with this. And I'm going to grab everything by highlighting all of this, look at it from the side here so I can see my rotate handle. Just keep it inside the circle and snap it to 90 degrees. We'll hit D to make sure that it's dropped on the floor. And I've stood it upright so that I can cut the center out of here so that I can have enough of an opening for my light source and my fire. Now, I haven't grouped these handles there, although you could, but this way I can easily click and remember what my dimensions are. And it's 40 by 60. So we're going to grab ourselves another box and make sure that it's set to hole. And we know that this has cut in 2 millimeters. So we need our walls to be at least 3 millimeters thick. So we need to subtract 6 from all of the sides. So our 40 by 60 needs to become 34. Oops. Click on this. 34 by 54. And now, if we center this hole with our object here, and let's actually make it super tall, just so that we can see it, we'll shift click on our dumpster and align. Click on the dumpster again so it won't move and anything else will align to it. And then we can center on the dumpster. Got this centered. Perfect. We're going to cut the entire bottom out, which, if you have a larger light source that you need a hole this big for, you might do. But we are going to make it have a 3 millimeter thick bottom as well. So we'll click on our hole and go up 3 millimeters. If it's hard to drag exactly 3, you can always click on the measurement and set it that way. Now we'll select all of this and group it together. There we have the body of our dumpster lamp. Next, we are going to make a fire. So, we're going to start, strangely enough, with a pyramid. Because we are planning to print this fire hollow, we need to make sure that every line in it will slope upwards so that we don't have any kind of shape that needs support on the inside. So I'm going to start by taking a pyramid and we will put it in the center of our object here. Let's go center and center. And so that I can see where the pyramid intersects, I'm going to select our dumpster body shape here, click on the color, and we'll change it to transparent. This can be very handy for telling where things are intersecting with each other. So let's raise our pyramid up a bit, hold down Shift, and make this thing bigger. All right. While I could make this the same exact measurements as our dumpster, that wouldn't really help because what I want to do is make it intersect with the inside edge. And let's make this a little bit shorter so that it's not so very tall. And we want it to intersect with the back a little bit more. I think the best way to do that will be to rotate it a little bit forward. And since we didn't do a whole 22 degrees, I'm just going to go here to see where we're intersecting. Oops, looks like I need to center it again. Always go back to the Align tool if you've moved something in a way you didn't expect. And if we hold down Alt when we move one of our handles, it will move in both directions at the same time. So now I have a pyramid. I'm not concerned with the part that sticks out, since I'm going to cut it off. But I can see that it intersects with the inside here, and we're going to use that to make our flame area fit perfectly in this hole so that you can just push it in and it will stay stuck. So now let's start adding flames. And to do that, I'm going to find an interesting shape. So a cone or a pyramid has very sharp points and edges, and I want a point, but I don't want it to have flat edges or a perfect slope. So I like the paraboloid. However, it doesn't come to a very good point. I like the curve. So we're going to go into some of the other menus, and we're going to find a shape called ogive. So if we go into shape generators and all, we have to move down the list until we get to page 7. Oops, there we go. So on 7, we have some interesting versions of our mass shapes, and I can see here that I have placed a star. If you click on the star on one of these objects, it will add it to your favorites. So down at you in favorites, you can see the shapes that I have used and favorited. So we're going to use ogive. It is much like the paraboloid, but it comes to a point. It has some very interesting sliders. You can try changing the radius, the amount of sharpness, the slope of the tangent. So it definitely becomes sort of a candle flame shape. And we can increase the number of segments in both directions to make it smoother. So I like how this shape looks a little bit like fire. So let's use it. We'll turn it orange. And just because we want this to be part of the same shape, turn this orange too. We'll take our ogive and let's put it in the middle. I'm not going to be very precise with these shapes because we want it to appear a little bit random, like fire. So let's move this up a bit. So we have our main one in the center. And perhaps we'll make it a little shorter and fatter. Move this up. There we go, like that. We're only concerned about how it looks coming out of the top because we're going to cut off everything else at the end. So let's take a look and duplicate. With our duplicate shape, we can hold down Shift, shrink this thing down. We can stretch it out in one direction or another. Now I want to keep the points as close to the slope of the previous one as I can. If we design this with multiple points, and they are not anywhere near each other, we will have these very deep valleys, and the deep valleys are a problem when we want to print a shape that is hollow. Since we're making it hollow, a deep valley will be an area that is going to require supports on the inside, which we can't do. So we're going to make our fiery looking shape by keeping everything close in. Let's duplicate this and narrow it down. And we want to make sure that our fire shape stays inside of our dumpster. Don't want the fire getting out of the dumpster. So let's go ahead and let's duplicate multiples at the same time. Duplicate here. We'll move this set over and go ahead and place one in the back. Hold down Shift and we'll make a couple of smaller ones to fill in these corners. Control D can also be used to duplicate. All right, raise that up a little bit. Duplicate. Another small one. We got to make sure that it doesn't hang over the edge. One more duplicate for this corner. And one more. There we go. I like that. So now we've got our fiery or mountainy looking shape, and if we can print it in a red or orange plastic, it'll look that much more like a flame. So let's trim away all of the area of this fire that we do not want. The first thing I'm going to want to do is make a hole that is the same as my dumpster area so that I can cut this edge completely away. So let's make a duplicate in the same spot and change that duplicate into a hole. Next, we're going to create another hole here. Although, in this case, I want to be very careful that I don't accidentally delete my dumpster itself with a hole. So what I'm going to do is actually keep this one solid. And let's go ahead and take our solid copy that we made and hide it. So when you click on an object and you hide it with this light bulb here, it's going to disappear. Let's see that I have this copy still remains. If I unhide these things, we'll have our second copy. Leave that in place and hide it. We'll take the one that is still visible and turn it into a hole. Now, whatever I do, I cannot affect my hidden shape. So when I'm done making this, I will unhide and we'll have our other shape completely safe. So we don't want to have this outer edge at all. So we're going to go back into basic shapes, grab another box, make this guy bigger than everything else, and oops, let's look at this in perspective view. Okay, we need to rotate it. Whoops. Got to be careful of that rotate tool. It likes to be over the top of a different handle. And we're going to rotate it the same 10 degrees we rotated the whole pyramid. That way we can easily go up here and trim off the entire bottom of the pyramid that is sticking out the sides. Make sure that the whole thing is highlighted, and you can see that we are going to cut off all of the parts of the shape that run into the dumpster. So this looks good. Let's try and group everything and test it out. Group. Because I have so many shapes selected at once, it's going to take Tinkercad a while to think about this. Perfect. Now I've got a shape with a bottom edge that matches the inside of my dumpster shape. And while it is a solid right now, we're going to use some slicing techniques to print it hollow. So I'll go ahead and turn this onto transparent. And then we'll click on the Show All button here to show my hidden dumpster. Click on that and turn it off of transparent. So here we go. Now we have the main parts of our lamp, and all we need to do is add a hole for our light fixture. So we're going to go into the circuit assemblies. We can take the glow and the glow cutout. Oop, there we go. The cutout simply needs to be added to the center of this. So we will use the line tool, click on our dumpster and center in both directions. And we can see that our hole is just big enough. Since we have our two objects already selected, we're just going to hit group. And now we have a hole in the bottom here that is perfect for this object. It's designed so that you can see there's a little bit of a gap there for it to bend, and it will snap fit right into place. Next, we'll be setting up all of these individual parts to print, with special attention to how we're going to print our hollow fire. See you then. Hi everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be slicing all of our individual parts so that we can print our multi-part 2020 dumpster fire lamp. So, let's start with the objects that we can print flat. So we're going to do the easy ones first. Make sure that you have selected everything that you want to print at once. 2020 is a single text object, so we have the selected shape, STL, and it's going to name it just the same as our Tinkercad design. So when we go in here, I like to go and make sure that, since I have all of my previous versions of the dumpster fire, that I take and change the name. So our newest dumpster fire object here, we're going to change it, and we're going to call it 2020. Open that up. 2020 is very straightforward. All of it is straight up and down, and as long as we had left it flat on the ground in Tinkercad, it'll be flat on the ground here. It needs no supports, and we can print it at a standard or even lower quality, which will only increase the layer height and won't really change what the surface looks like at all. So we'll slice this, preview just to be sure. Got 10 layers, and nothing looks wrong with it. We'll save this file, and we're going to start a large collection of G-code files that we'll need to upload individually. So we can send this one to our printer and start 15 minutes in the color that you want, 2020. Switch back to prepare and remove this object. Now let's take the dumpster itself. So when we export this, we want to do the same exact thing. Select shape, STL. Let's make sure that our name is lamp body. Would help if I could type. Open that. Oops. Yes, I changed the name. There we go. Open it. And we can see that we've got 45-degree angles facing down here. And that is just about the level where it wants to place supports on them. Ooh, at low quality, it wants to place them at 35. Interesting. So let's head up here and increase the quality level of this. And we can, in fact, change our support level to 50. Because 45 is a little bit severe. We can see that we've got some red areas here and the bottom of this. Now, underneath our holes for our numbers, this is a tiny 2 millimeter space. So it's unlikely that it's going to drop enough when it's going out 2 millimeters for it to matter. And putting supports in there is going to be a big pain to remove. So we shall set our supports from everywhere to touching build plate. Now we're not going to have supports on the inside of this or on the inside of this, and we'll just have them up here to make sure the bottom side here doesn't look bad. And I should still have my settings to normal. That's good. All right. Normal supports, touching build plate. And slice. Now if we preview, we can see we just have a support column underneath this so that we don't have sagging on the undersides of our handles here. And everything looks good. This wall is pretty thin, but it should be solid. Save this one. And now we've got a significant amount of time to get the rest of ours ready while we print in our green plastic for 4 hours. Let's remove this one and set up our next one. The last easy one is our glow circuit. As you can see, there are little instructions in here that Tinkercad will give you, but it shows a LED and a little coin cell battery stuck in there. You don't need to print this part if you have another LED device that you're planning to put in here, but if we select this and export it, selected shape, STL, let's open it up, and we'll call it our dumpster fire LED. You can see that it gives you an STL without those placeholder objects. So it's a gap big enough for the battery and slots for the legs of the LED. So when you place the LED in there, it will automatically be on. And you can pull this unit out and disconnect the LED in order to turn the lamp off. All right. So we don't need any supports for this guy, as you can see, and we'll just slice him. Check the preview, although we didn't make this part, but just in case, I always check the preview. Everything looks good. We'll save this to file. And now we're on to the fun part. Let's go and remove this guy back in here and select the fire itself. So if we've made our fire fit this angle, the bottom of it will be 10 degrees. If we want, we can go in here and drop it to the floor and check to be sure it's on the ground by using this to rotate exactly 10 degrees back. Hopefully that should do it. If not, you'll have to rotate it inside of your slicer. So let's go to Export, Selected Shape, STL, back to the slicer. There we go. And we're going to call this the dumpster fire. Why not? Dumpster fire is ready to open. And, looks like it didn't line up perfectly with the floor. So, we want to go to select our object, go to the rotate, and we can use the select face to align to build plate, and use that to select the bottom. Now the highlights go away when you do this. It often doesn't want to redo that. Oh, there it goes. And now it's blue. Perfect. If you can't use the align to build plate option, you can try lay flat, which will try and get it to be as flat as possible. Or you can rotate it 1 degree at a time until you can tell that it is perfectly on the ground. But it should be blue because we have cut a perfectly flat surface on the bottom of our fire. All right, now we have to change some settings. We don't want any supports since we can't support internal parts. And we want this to be completely hollow, so we're going to have to do some tricks. Let's move up, and we can go ahead and make our quality actually even higher than this. This will take longer, but because we have a lot of smooth curves, they'll look a lot nicer if we increase the quality, which is to say, make the layer height smaller so that each step is a little bit smoother. Now we're going to check on the shell. We can see that our wall line count is 3, so it's going to do 3 turns around for each outside wall, and that's good. Some settings it goes down to 2, so we want to increase this to 3 so it makes a sturdy outer wall, because we're going to go to the top and bottom thickness here and just turn that to 0. Now it's not going to attempt to fill in any solid tops, which it doesn't have any because it comes to points, and it's not going to attempt to fill in the bottom. Next, we have to go to our infill and tell it that we don't want any. So this one is also going to 0. And you can see that when you fill it in with 0, it's going to be completely hollow. And so, as you can tell from these, we should have no bottom, no top, no inside, and only 3 times around the walls. Let's slice it and see how it looks. This one's going to take 1 hour. Let's look at the preview and slide it on down. All right, we're looking good. We have some very specific things to look for when we go through this preview. It's going to draw these 3 lines on the bottom here, and that's all that's going to stick to the floor. We're going to be building all of our layers up from here, so we can't have it shoot out at a very steep angle or it will drop down. Now if we had some part in here where our 2 flames were not close enough to each other, that we had a line coming in, we might have a sag and a hole somewhere on the inside of our fire. We also want to make sure that all of the tips close up well. We don't have any little valleys in there that we missed that are going to drop back down. If you have a valley dropping down, you'll see an island. Lots of geography terminology, but an island is where there is a part that is not attached to any other part. You would see if we drop down in here that there would be some lines in the middle of space, not supported by any wall or anything, and with a hollow shape, those would just drop in there and become a hole. So, looks like I've avoided any islands, and my fire is ready to print. So I'm going to save this one, And now I've got all the files I need for a crazy 2020 dumpster fire.